Okay, Alex, let's go ahead and get started. Thank you to everybody for tuning in right now, and we're very, very grateful to Divvy for taking time out of their busy days to help us think through how Utah companies of all kinds and sizes can benefit from the federal programs that are coming down through the CARES Act. At the top, very quickly, I just want to make sure that everybody who is listening in now and watches this later knows where they can go to get help and assistance with what the governor's task force is doing when it comes to the CARES Act. So World Trade Center Utah is working as part of the governor's task force. We've been asked to set up a federal committee. And so we convene all of Utah's congressional delegation, all of our key federal partners, as well as partners here across the state, to figure out how do we help maximize the number of Utah companies who benefit from the federal programs and resources that are included in the CARES Act, but also more broadly than that as well. We quickly realized as a group that there would be obstacles information now. Every Utah business in the state, there's very up-to-date information, actual information on what businesses can do to continue to take advantage of these resources. The other is we realized the SBA, other key partners in the state, the Governor's Office of Economic Development, will be overwhelmed with requests. And so we set up a rapid response team. The rapid response team went live about a week and a half ago. It's comprised of 50 volunteers from 20 different organizations. They now have helped 1,300 Utah businesses through the process of understanding which programs they're eligible for, how they can apply, and troubleshooting issues for them as they've gone through that process. For anybody who is interested in receiving that assistance, they can go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Right there on the top of the screen is a button where you can click submit request for assistance. A company fills that out, they put the information in there, and then a member of the rapid response team will follow very quickly. Also, for any companies that are engaging with international business, World Trade Center Utah is continuing to offer our free consultations, market research, our grant programs where companies can receive up to $10,000 to help grow their business internationally. And of course, right now, as we're all facing the challenges of COVID-19, there's a significant focus on how do we help companies retain their sales. And so maybe a company had a distributor in India that they now need to find a new person or a manufacturer in China. We can then use our grant sources with our global network and our free consultations to help companies connect with the people they need to connect with so you can continue to maintain your business moving forward. But of course, today we're talking about the CARES Act, the Paycheck Protection Program, economic injury disaster loans, and other things that Divvy has become very, very effective at doing and helping companies access this funding, both here in Utah, but really across the country. Today on the line, we decided to structure this a little bit differently. We wanted to focus in and make sure that our key partners and the multipliers here in the state that are working with multicultural companies as well as rural companies have a chance to hear directly from Divvy, to receive this information. And then we want to make sure that there's a good discussion at the end so that all of you have a chance to ask questions, get direct information, and that way you can push that out through your networks to make sure that we are helping these companies here in the state get access to this information. So we have participants from Grand County, Carbon County, the Utah Chinese Association, the Utah Black Chamber, the India Association of Industries, the U.S.-Mexico Chamber, the Davis Chamber of Commerce, the Salt Lake Chamber of Commerce, and other both multipliers and businesses as well. So first, I'll kick things off by introducing Alex Bean. Alex is the co-founder and CBO of Divvy. And in that role, he oversees all the company's strategic initiatives with a special focus on growth and strategic partnerships. Alex co-founded Divvy in 2016 and has grown the company to become really, truly a fintech leader, no question, here in the state, but also nationally, internationally as well. They are now used by more than 5,000 companies. And Alex, really hats off to you and to your team for the incredible work that you've done on the Paycheck Protection Program. I'd be interested at the top to get an update on how many applications you've processed and the dollar value of that, just to underscore really how much Divvy has stepped up in a major way to help companies here in the state, but also across the country. And also very grateful to the members of your team for spending some time with us. So Alex, with that introduction, I'll kick it over to you, and you can take it from here.
Appreciate it. Thank you, Miles. Yeah, we're very excited, and I say we're because I had to bring Casey and Mike on. They're the brains behind the operation at Divvy. But really what we're going to do, we're going to treat this to be informational for two audiences. One is the business itself, which I'll kind of be the presenter and answer questions and cover some topics there. Casey is our head of people and places. She comes from Uber and a background. Again, where else, Casey, before Uber? I know there's a few other Overstock.
Retail Me Not, and from consulting prior.
Okay. So Casey has an incredible background to walk us through what this really means for your employees, and as a business, how you should be thinking about your employees. And so we'll get into the details there. And then Mike Schreiner is going to be our host to kind of walk us through our content today. So we're really looking forward to it from a Divvy perspective. You know, we've done around $2 billion in loans for the PPP. You know, we're looking at thousands of applications almost every day. So it has been a crazy week and a half since it got passed. But we are all about the SMB. That is our audience. That's who we care about. That is who we want to keep in business and keep going strong. So for us, it is both a public service, but also, you know, something we're doing because it's better for us if these SMBs stay in business and stay strong. So we're really putting all of our weight and our energy, our employees to this. So hopefully today you get some good information and we can pass it on to you. And as multipliers, you can pass it on to the people within your communities. So Mike, why don't we go from there and kind of walk through our content today?
Great. Thanks, Alex. And yeah, we're excited to walk through this. Alex kind of touched on it. We've got our full weight behind this thing. We pivoted our whole revenue organization from marketing to customer support, sales, everything to PPP loan support. And so we've been doing this full time since the loans went live. So hopefully we'll be able to get some good information out there to anybody who needs it. Alex, why don't you kick us off with just kind of a broad level overview of the CARES Act as a whole, and you know why it's doing what it's doing, why it's got to focus on small business, what that means for the economy at large, just kind of the view from 30,000 feet.
Yeah, and a lot of you are probably pretty aware, but I mean, there are some pretty interesting things that have come out, and as we start to really understand the impacts and ramifications of the CARES Act. But the CARES Act is obviously the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act. So it's all around the coronavirus that has shut down our economy, that has impacted our public health, and it's $2 trillion, which it's like people I don't think realize how much money that is. We're talking about 560 billion to individuals, 500 to large corporations, 377 billion for you guys, for the small businesses out there, and again another trillion out there for public health, education, etc. So there is a ton of money. And to put that in perspective, in 1933, the New Deal that FDR put in place was 653 billion for adjusted spending. So in 2009, during the Great Recession that we call it, that was $840 billion act. This is $2 trillion and counting. It's not done yet, and we'll get into some of those details now. So it is almost 2 times larger than the largest economic relief package ever approved by our government. So it is massive for sure. And really, you know, there's one main thing to call out here. The big difference between now and 2008 is that in 2008, corporations, capitalism, is, if you were, you know, got greedy in a certain sense, like the mortgages, we were lending out mortgages at a rate that we couldn't sustain to people that couldn't pay it. This is entirely different because we are talking about the government is telling us to stay home for what is now a month, potentially months at a time. They're shutting down businesses. So we are being impacted in a way that we've never seen before. So right now, as everyone knows, obviously the economy is down. We're looking at potential recession to us. You know, we don't know to what degree. The CARES Act itself and what Divvy's doing, as well as what the government is trying to do, is say, hey, we're asking you to stay home so we can solve the physical health issue, and we're trying to put in place Band-Aids before we can get back to work and really solve the economic issue. So it's massive. We're going to get into the details of it today, but that's what the CARES Act is.
Okay, I love it. Let's dive in specifically to the SBA loans and the PPP payroll protection stuff. And this is the part for all of the attendees out there. If you've got questions, or I think we'll get into most of the details, but if you've got questions, don't hesitate to throw into the chat or into the Q&A, and we'll make sure that we address them. So Alex, let's go through the payroll protection stuff. How can somebody know if they're eligible? What is the money supposed to be used for? How do they make sure that they don't have to pay it back? What are kind of the nitty-gritty details?
Yeah, and this is probably an appropriate time to say that we are not giving financial and legal advice. If you really do want legal advice to a nuanced question that you might have, consult a lawyer. Casey, myself, Mike, and Sawyer, we do feel like we are experts, that we have put a lot of time into this, but just want to make sure if you have a specific question, feel free to put it into the chat. If we don't know it, or if it is, again, a nuance to your specific company, we might point you towards legal counsel. So the SBA, Small Business Administration, I think people are pretty familiar with that. The PPP is really just a program within the SBA. So it's the Paycheck Protection Program. And again, that's what it is. They want people to stay at work. They don't want, as we shut down restaurants, as we shut down nonprofits going to work, they don't want employers just to let everyone go and have unemployment go higher than it already is. So we put this in, or the government's put this in place. I think, do we have the next slide kind of outlines who's eligible? Is that, yeah, here you go. So, from who's eligible, this is a nice little checklist. It is everything from kind of that one person sole prop, the contractor, the self-employed, all the way up to businesses that are, healthy. They have hundreds of employees. There is a cap at 500. There are other options above 500. So if you have more than 500, we can send you some links to walk you through that. Nonprofits, 501c3s qualify, and again, veteran organizations. So you can kind of see this checklist. Again, feel free to ask questions that might be more specific. So in terms of what the money can actually be used for, so again, it is meant to keep people employed. So this is almost a fully forgiven loan. The actual loan is 2 years maturity, interest rate of 1%. But if you're using it towards payroll costs, interest on mortgage, your rent, your utilities, anything to keep the quote unquote lights on, the government's going to forgive that loan pretty significantly and allow you to get back to work and to have confidence that we're going to get out of this, this shutdown phase, and people will go back to restaurants, back to work, go back to being a commerce. So that's what you can use it for, right? Payroll, interest, rent, utilities, things of that nature.
Love it. So Alex, we've got a question in the chat real quick.
Yeah.
It said, I received my EIDL grant. It took exactly 3 weeks. How long is it taking for PPPs to process?
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah, it's a great question. To be fair to the infrastructure that was out there, the government basically said, we want to give $377 billion to small businesses, and they signed a piece of paper, and then it was like, well, hold on, how do we do as fast as we can? The government is not typically known for being as fast as you can, so they've kind of partnered with banks. Divvy is not a bank itself, but we've partnered with the charter banks Cross River. So Cross River Bank out of New Jersey. And these banks that are already working with the SBA, that already have teams to underwrite and kind of have that process, they're the ones being tacked with it. So about a week and a half ago, you started seeing people apply. The SBA, which has the E-Trans software that's back there, I'm getting a little technical, kind of had to get up on its feet. Really last week is when you started to see a lot of people begin applying. Now that some of the kinks are out of the system, I think if you were to apply today, you'd see a response from the SBA in 24 to 48 hours, and then you'd get funded in 3 days. So you're looking at probably a combined 5 to 7 business days from applying to getting funded. At least that's the hope. That is what we're seeing at Divvy. I can't speak to every bank process out there. I know from a Divvy standpoint, I believe we are one of the only fully automated processes. So there's not a need to manually handhold or to call a banker. And with some of these companies, if the bank's too big, it's been hard to get a hold of a banker. If the bank's too small, they might not have the tech or the everything they need to get it through. Again, can't speak for every situation, but from Divvy, you come and sign up, we'll have you taken care of in around 5 days.
Awesome. Another clarifying question on the chat. If we are a virtual business and don't have rent or utilities expenses, can the loan be used for operating expenses like software subscriptions, et cetera?
Casey, you might have an answer. I don't think you can.
No,
Yeah.
it can't. As Alex alluded to earlier, really what we saw after the financial crisis in 2008 was a significant dip in unemployment. And so that is specifically, as we listen to the senators and the congressmen, that is specifically what the Paycheck Protection Act is trying to help curb, is the spike in unemployment, although we are seeing that. And that's why there are such restrictions around really using it most heavily for payroll costs and the cost of operating your business. There's a very specific list, and Sawyer may have actually put it out. I know he put the CARES Act, the link in the chat. So do check that out. Right now, they're not allowing for software subscriptions, was the latest information that we got. So really looking around, like what other payroll costs could you use it for? That would be my recommendation. But again, there's a very specific list of what you can and can't use it for.
This might be an appropriate time too. It does change. So like nothing is final. What we've seen is like the government put it out there. They've realized they've had to say who qualifies. They've tweaked that. They've said what you can use it for. They've tweaked that. So, you know, that Casey's correct. That is the current guidance, but stay tuned, pay attention, because it might change. They might actually, you know, say, you know, it's fine to use it for X, Y, Z. We don't know yet, but it is evolving. It is dynamic.
With the companies that are applying, does the company need to show that they're being negatively impacted or harmed by coronavirus? Because we have a question in the chat that says that they haven't been affected, but it's not clear what it'll look like 6 months from now.
Yeah, I mean, I would say for now, I would apply that we're not having to do a ton to, you know, as we help our customers apply, you can kind of estimate that, but for the most part, apply. If you're a small business, I believe you would qualify. Again, Casey, do you have any specific stuff on that?
Yeah, I think, again, this is where the language in the act itself, specifically regarding the Paycheck Protection Act, is there are some nuances there. So I would recommend applying if you feel like you're going to be impacted, but right now there's not a specific question around that. But again, the purpose is to really protect jobs, and that's why, you know, they focus more significantly on using the funds for your payroll costs or other operating expenses such as rent, mortgage, et cetera, during the 2-month period that you're eligible to spend it. And then if you are able to retain your employees, so you keep your payroll intact, then that's where the loan forgiveness comes in after the fact.
Awesome. We have a couple other quick questions that I think I can answer rapid fire. There's a question about if the requirement for full forgiveness is 75% to payroll costs. The technical wording says that you can't decrease your those expenses more than 25%. So yes, I'm going to keep it at 75% of what it was. The 5 to 7 days was for the PPP. Like Alex was saying, at Divvy, we're seeing it a little bit quicker. Our banking partner has been 3 to 5 days for approval and funding. But honestly, that depends more on the bank than on the process, than on the SBA. Okay, that's it for questions on that. Actually, sorry, we have one more on the question part. What's the possibility for a 501c6 nonprofit chambers of commerce?
Yeah, I don't think that's been specifically approved. So unfortunately, I don't think you can. Again, it's dynamic, so continue to pay attention, but I don't think right now that's been approved.
Great. Okay, let's go on to our next question then. And on this one, we're going to pivot, Casey, towards you. And to give everyone a intro or shout out, I don't know what you want to call it. Casey heads up our people and places team here at Divvy, like Alex mentioned. And their response to this has been phenomenal, from taking care of employees, making sure people have equipment, making sure people are staying mentally healthy. It has been best in class. And so she'll have some really great input on this. So Casey, talk to us, when you look at something like COVID-19, you look at the CARES Act, you look at all these things that are going on, what's the impact to the individual and the employees as part of these companies?
Yeah, I think a lot of the feedback that we've gotten, and thanks for the shout out, our team works really hard to make sure that one, we're demonstrating some leadership, but also some empathy during this time. And I think one of the most important things that you can do for your employees is you almost can't over communicate right now. We have people, and I'm sure across the line here, depending upon your workplace situation, we've got people that are now working from home or who have altered work schedules. Some workplaces are completely closed, or there's a lack of work, or people aren't able to telework. We've got different counties and states across the U.S., but also specifically here in Utah, who have almost shelter at home or our Stay Home, Stay Safe Act. So there's a lot of different impacts and things that people are going through. And then we also know that for our folks who are parents, we have children at home. So we're also being asked to homeschool during this time, which is a completely separate job. So I think, one of the things that we focused on, and I recommend focusing on, is just how can you be empathetic? What can you communicate to try to ease those burdens so that people still feel the connection and the culture of your workplace, even though you may not all be together at this time?
Love that. Thanks, Casey. Let's see, we've had a couple other, I see your questions, the ones that just came in. We'll actually swing back to those after we finish talking about some of the more kind of HR type questions. So Casey, when you're looking at all the employees you have, obviously Divvy's been growing a lot. You've got a lot of people from tons of different backgrounds, different locations, life situations like you mentioned. What's been some best practices in how you communicate about all of this stuff with the employees?
Sure. So I always recommend being as honest and transparent as you can. I always caution business leaders that being transparent doesn't mean that everyone gets to know everything at all times, because I recognize that sometimes the leadership of the company is trying to understand. And I know that furlough versus layoff is mentioned here, as we've gotten that question a lot from our own internal employees, but also from others in the business community. So there are things that you're trying to figure out and how your company is being impacted. But again, I can't stress enough how important it is to communicate out what you know when you know it, in a way that is empathetic to what the employees are going through, but also calling them to action. What can they be doing? How can they rally around making sure that they're taken care of, but also that the business is taken care of during this time, so that the business can outlast the recession that we're now in and outlast the impacts of COVID-19.
That's awesome. And we saw this a lot on our sales floor. Obviously, sales teams are getting hit really hard with everything going on. But it was very inspiring and very motivating for everybody to see the whole company rally around a cause. And for us, that cause was these PPP loans and helping our clients stay in business. And then we opened it up to a lot of others. So just to echo what Casey said, being transparent with them about the issues and the strategy, and I think also being transparent and helping them rally around a cause that unites the company is really powerful. And we've seen some of our people start to go above and beyond and put in more of an effort than they ever have on some of these things that maybe they're not, directly compensated for or what they weren't hired to do. So that's great. As far as the employees go, it mentions here unemployment benefits. So, obviously no company wants to face the ugliness of having to do layoffs if they can avoid it. And that's the whole goal of this PPP loans that are going out. But walk us through what those look like and options for employers, how they approach that.
Yeah, so unemployment is technically administered by each state, but what the CARES Act has done is it has enhanced the unemployment benefits. So if you do have to move to a situation with either layoff or furlough, and I can speak a little bit more to those in a moment, what it's done is it's extended the state unemployment benefits by 13 weeks. So for example, Utah previously was 26 weeks max. So it's extended that beyond. It's also created a $600 in additional weekly benefit for people through the end of July, so through July 31 of this year. And, you know, again, the government is watching that. We already know that there's talks for additional relief packages. So this is an ever evolving thing, just like what we're seeing from the SBA loan perspective. So I encourage you to keep an eye on it. In addition to unemployment benefits, and I do want to mention this because sometimes there are things that kind of sneak through that you aren't aware of from a regulatory standpoint that you as a small business owner, specifically if you have fewer than 500 employees, that you need to do that you might not have been doing before. And that is around the Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So in addition to, if you're familiar with the Family Medical Leave Act, there's now this additional Families First Coronavirus Response Act, which requires you to provide paid leave. And it also requires a very specific posting where there are fines if you don't post it somehow to your employees. You can post it electronically or physically. And so that's a very, very important thing. And so I know that we'll have the list and we can send that out after this just to make sure that you get that up in your workplace. Again, sometimes things slide through, and if you weren't in the right channels to make sure that you got that posted, you could have missed it. But as we know, people are, you know, now homeschooling. They could have had a loss of childcare, or if you've furloughed them specifically, then you may be required to provide paid leave. There are some exemptions available if you have fewer than 50 employees. So again, it's a very, very nuanced act around this leave if someone has been specifically impacted by COVID-19. So just to mention there, but we'll get you some of that information in case you haven't seen it. And then just regarding furlough versus layoff, I know that we've gotten these questions even internally at Divvy, you know, for business owners to understand. And typically you see, or at least pre-COVID, you would have seen furloughs mainly in like the retail and hospitality industries. So you might have noticed as COVID first hit, I think Marriott, Macy's were some of the larger companies to announce that they were furloughing employees. And really a furlough is an extended leave of absence that is unpaid. So again, this is where, depending upon what you're going to be doing with the PPP loans, it is an unpaid leave. So essentially people are put on unpaid leave. You continue paying their benefits if they're enrolled in benefit programs through you as the employer, but they become eligible for the unemployment benefit. So again, there's pros and cons into weighing a furlough or layoff versus applying for the PPP. And then obviously a layoff would be that you don't expect to be able to bring these people back because you're anticipating that your business is going to be impacted far longer than kind of the 2 months for the PPP protection. And it's a little bit unknown what your head count or even what the work is going to look like for you over, I would say, the next 6 to 9 months.
Great. And so just to clarify then, if I'm a business owner, I have some employees that I'm either going to need to lay off or to furlough. If I furlough them, I continue paying their benefits and, you know, kind of let them keep their insurance and things a little bit longer. Are they still eligible to apply for unemployment and things like that?
Yes. Yes.
Perfect.
Under a furlough, they may apply for unemployment during the time that you have put them on the unpaid leave of absence.
Great. Okay, let's jump rapid fire to a couple of these questions again real quick as well. So Tessa asked, what other options would you recommend outside of PPP and EIDL? We're looking for working capital to grow another channel of our business. We've been heading up a little bit over the last few days, digging into the Main Street loans. It's another piece of the CARES Act where they are going to, it's not a grant, so it doesn't convert to a grant like the PPP loans do. But it's another way to get funding from the government. And I don't know, Alex or Casey, do you guys have more details on requirements and things like that? It is for companies up to $2.5 billion in annual revenue and up to 10,000 employees. But you can apply for those loans if you applied for a PPP loan as well. You can double dip on those. Other than that, I don't have too many details.
Yeah, a few things to note on the Main Street, just as Mike mentioned, it does not convert to a grant, meaning it's not as free money as the PPP is. You're also paying some of the origination fees, so it is more costly. It's still, I think, favorable, but it's not at the same level of the PPP. I think we're all getting a little bit more information, so Mike, we can send that out maybe Sawyer or you, we can send out posts. But yeah, it is. Main Street is definitely a way to get funding. It is not as cheap as PPP, but that would be your next best bet.
Great. And then we've had this question come in probably 1,000 times a day for the last week. If an entity has applied elsewhere and is having issues with their application, can they apply with Divvy and abandon the other bank? So here's the technical answer that we've been giving. We don't officially recommend that. There's nothing stopping you from doing that. If you cancel your application with a previous bank and apply through Divvy, we do have by far the best process out there. When Wells Fargo was capped, they were sending their clients to Divvy to apply. So the process is good. The funding is quick. If you're already in the process and you don't want to start over, it's potentially better to stay where you're at. And again, we're not giving official legal or financial advice. We're very biased that Divvy has the best way to do it, but it's an option. Not officially recommended, but it's an option.
If you already have, if it's been processed with the SBA, but it hasn't been funded, I would not switch over to Divvy. If it hasn't been processed, then it might be an easier discussion, but just be careful getting too far in the process, getting a little antsy and then switching. So, again, you don't want to lose your spot in line, quote unquote, if you've already been with the SBA and you pull out, it gets a little tricky.
And Mike and Alex, just to jump in, this is Miles, as we've worked with the rapid response team and as companies have submitted applications, but for whatever reason, their financial institution, they're dragging their feet, they don't have the processes in place. Mike, I appreciate your diplomatic answer, but we've been very forward leaning on telling businesses to go where you can get service quickly and efficiently. There are many lenders here in the state of Utah that are doing great work. We've been keeping a list of those lenders and recommending that to businesses who are having challenges with whoever they submitted their application to. And Divvy is absolutely on that list. And so really is for all the chambers that are on the call today, and then also some of the government leaders in rural Utah, you want your companies to get help. And if the financial institution they're working with isn't able to do that right now, then they can go ahead and jump in and find people who can help them quickly. But Alex, I think you did a great, provide some great nuance there that if it's already been approved by SBA, if you're already down the process of ways, then you don't want to jump ship and start over. But you absolutely want to make sure that you're going where you need to go to get help. Because our businesses need help right away.
Yeah, and I think that's the key is if you're not in line yet, if your application isn't submitted to the SBA, go through whoever you can to get that application in line. Once you're in, just sit tight. You'll get funded. It might be a difference of a day or two, but you're better off to wait than to start over and lose your spot in line. So yeah, I think that's well said for Miles and Alex. We had a question come in if there's a way to see how much PPP funding is still available. So the last word was that 205 billion of the 350 had been claimed. But I don't know if we have data on how much has been applied for and not approved. Do you know, Alex or Casey, on that figure?
What was that number you just said, Mike?
As of yesterday at the close of business, 205 billion of the 350 billion had been claimed.
Yeah, so this is also a moving target. Basically, you've seen Munchin and a few other people say, hey, if that 377 gets eaten up and you've applied and you are eligible, the government will more than likely probably approve some additional funding for SBA. So, again, if you're eligible, if you qualify, wouldn't worry too much. But yes, there is urgency to this. Get your application through. Let's move it forward and make sure that you get your spot. But again, the thought process would be that if you are eligible, Munchin and others of the government are all leaning towards approving more, which is why I said 2 trillion in counting, because we do think there will be more.
Yeah. Okay. Let's jump forward. So as far as communicating about the CARES Act specifically within a business, and Casey, I'll direct this one towards you. How do you talk about CARES Act, PPP loans, things like that with employees. Obviously, you can't overpromise too much, but everybody wants to give their employees some feeling of safety and stability. So what's the best practices in your mind on how to communicate about that?
Again, I think setting the appropriate expectations, and you may be getting questions directly. I know as we have at Divvy of, whether or not you're applying for the PPP loan, what are the expectations regarding furlough versus layoffs? So again, I would recommend being as transparent and open as possible, but also being honest about what you don't know, right, as you're still working through the process. And then we know there are specific things in the CARES Act, such as the stimulus checks. There are 401k distribution forgiveness and 401k loan forgiveness. There's expansions to things like health savings accounts, if you have that as part of your health plans. And then there is some guidance around mortgage and rent relief, as well as student loan relief. So there are some very direct things that apply to your employees specifically that you could serve as a source of truth on. I know we've gotten that feedback from our team around, we've consolidated into one place all of that information so that people are able to access it easily. And certainly in the event of a layoff or a furlough, I do think that there is some responsibility on the part of the employer to at least provide some direction around how to apply for the unemployment benefits and how you're specifically going to help.
Great. What team members in specific would you talk to? Are there departments that you would avoid? You talk to everybody?
Well, I lean more towards transparency. So I would communicate, to everyone if you can. Again, they're probably looking to you for leadership during this time to understand, where they fall on terms of employment. If you furlough, obviously there's some information that you'll need to provide there regarding expected return to work and access to those benefits. If you lay off individuals, there's a burden of information to also provide around how you're going to handle, final pay, benefit continuation, things of that nature. So it really depends upon the situation that you're in, exactly what you would prepare to work through. And again, this is where if you don't have a human resources team internally, I would certainly look for guidance, and that guidance could also come through your legal counsel as well, specifically if you're laying off or furloughing.
Awesome. Okay, a couple other questions have come in, and a couple of these I can give quick answers to, and then some I'll defer to Alex on. So there's a question that says, on an entity with employees, do we assume employees who have salaries over 100K per year can only use 8 weeks divided by 52 weeks of their annual salary to qualify for the forgiveness? So on the application part of this, all employees that are salaried over 100 grand, only 100,000 of that counts towards the calculation. And then only 100,000 of that counts towards the maintaining 75%. So the business owners, you'll be taking all of the or the loan amount, all of the calculated amount of payroll expenses, like Alex said, expenses to keep the lights turned on, and then you'll need to maintain 75% of that. Question says, how does a self-employed person or a sole proprietor with the Schedule C use the funds for payroll? Is that just a distribution to themselves? I know there are different requirements for self-employed and 1099 sole proprietors. Alex, do you know the details on that?
I don't. I think, we'll have to just give good resources, send those links out. I don't have an answer on that.
Okay. We'll try to send out an answer to that one. This says, can we hold off a few days on a payroll that would normally run before the loan is received to have it occur during the 8-week period, or accelerate a payroll that would normally run after the 8-week window so it would be included in the 8-week period? Do you know the answer to that question, Alex?
Yeah, again, not being legal counsel on that. Yes. So you're talking about the 8-week forgiveness, yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, I think what they're asking is, if we have to maintain 75%, what if we don't pay the week before and we push that payroll through during the 8-week period, and then we pull a payroll up during the 8-week period so that maybe our total expenses are a little bit less than 75%, but for those 8 weeks, we'll hit 75%.
Casey, I see you thinking, maybe you can add, but my thought is, if you're keeping it consistent, right, I think they're going to look at not just 8 weeks, but kind of the average of what is your consistent 8 weeks. If you're talking about missing like a payroll cycle and where expenses are, that seems like a nuance that would be fine. Again, I'm not your lawyer, but if you're keeping the staff and you're just paying them a week later, again, I think you'd be fine, but I don't know exactly how that would play out.
And Mike, I can jump in here. So so once your loan's approved as a business, you get to decide when you accept the loan, and then again, you get the 8-week period. And so businesses absolutely are looking at the strategy of when they accept loans. And all you do, you take a look and figure out it's based on your pay cycle, what is the best date to accept this to maximize the amount of payroll that you're going to pay in that 8-week period, which then helps maximize the amount that you're going to be forgiven. And if that means you accept the loan, 1 day before you do payroll, then that's something that the businesses have the option to do, and that we see a lot of businesses doing to make sure that they can maximize, again, the amount that goes towards payroll. And that, of course, to hit that 75% threshold is important to maximize what is forgiven.
Awesome. Two more questions. One says that they often see the recommendation to set up a separate bank account for PPP fund usage, and if it's okay to transfer from there to their regular bank account. We haven't suggested that any of our applicants set up a separate account for PPP, but Alex, do you know any?
Yeah, so some banks are requiring for KYC that you set up, like, for example, if you haven't banked with them and now you want to go get the PPP loans through them, they're saying, okay, great, set up a bank account so that we have done KYC, they're in compliance. Now go get the PPP, we'll put it back into that bank account. It's a little bit of like getting a new customer too for the bank, if I'm just, that's their strategy. So that's what I've seen. Yeah, you can move that money to whatever bank account you need to operate. It doesn't need to sit into that new bank.
Okay. The last question that we have in the Q&A right now is, oh no, we have one more coming in. If an employee left on their own accord before June 30th, does it still count against us in reducing headcount? Should we run out and hire somebody? On our internal Q&A sheet, it says that it needs to be layoffs that are because of COVID-19, that are directed because of that. And then our legal counsel also said, don't touch this one with a 10-foot pole. So we're going to refer you to your legal counsel to get an official answer on that one. And then last question we have says, during this difficult time, some CEOs and C-level executives are providing free business consultants to minority and or small businesses. Is Divvy involved in this type of initiative? And if so, who is the contact?
Casey?
So we haven't set up anything specific. And again, I think we would lean towards our legal counsel on this, depending upon what the consultant advice that you were looking for. We're happy to provide resources regarding, and I know that, again, Sawyer has put out some. I'm happy to send some from an HR perspective regarding some of the regulatory requirements that could easily be missed during this time. But again, if it's legal or financial services related, then we would want to steer away from that. But we're open to providing other resources.
Love it. Okay, that's all the questions we've got. And, I think Miles will probably turn it over to you to wrap it up. But I just want to say thanks to everybody real quick for hopping on, and thanks Alex and Casey for sharing all of that. Like I said before, I'm obviously super biased because I think Divvy's the absolute greatest, but the executive team has been pretty phenomenal in how they've handled this whole situation, the communication with employees, the empathy, the, kind of keeping humanity a part of it all. It's been really great. And I think one of the most inspiring parts of all this is just seeing how businesses and companies and people come together to support each other. And we hope that, as Divvy, we're here to help. If you need help getting an application in, if you need help controlling expenses, whatever, we hope we can share best practices. Feel free to reach out. We're trying to kind of help support the community as much as we can. But thanks to all of you guys for being on today. And it's been a pleasure to be able to chat with you.
Great. Thank you, Mike, for moderating that. And a huge thanks to Alex, Casey, Mike, Sawyer for everything that you did to pull this together. We really appreciate your willingness to jump on with these multipliers on the call today and give them a chance to answer questions, get the information they need. And now for everybody on the call, you each have your constituencies. You're working with an aggregate hundreds and hundreds of companies here in the state of Utah from totally across the state, every industry, as well as the different multicultural communities. And so we want you to make sure that you take this information. We'll send out the slide deck. There's a recording for everything we talked about today, some of the detailed answers that we got to the questions that you all had. And we really strongly encourage you that you do everything you can to push this information out so that every small business in the state of Utah can understand what the program is, how they can participate, what they need to do to jump into the process, and then where they can turn to get assistance. And again, to the last question about, getting free consultations and advice to companies, minority-owned companies, like I mentioned in the beginning of the webinar, any company in the state can go to coronavirus.utah.gov/business. Right at the top of the page, there's a link where they can submit a request for help. If they fill that out, somebody from the rapid response team will follow up. I've got an update, and the volume is we're doing about 250 or helping 250 small businesses every day through the rapid response team. We want to see the request increase. We've got another 25 volunteers trained up, ready to go as soon as the demand increases, because we want to make sure that every business has the opportunity to get some one-on-one assistance, to be walked through these programs, and so that they can participate. And there's no barriers, whether it's language or expertise or having an existing lending relationship that prevents them from doing so. And so again, thank you to Divvy for doing this. You all are doing incredible work. Keep up the great work. Let us know how we can plug in and assist. And thank you to everybody who's been on the call today for all the work that you're doing to support the businesses in your community. And with that, we'll go ahead and close the webinar. So thank you. Have a great day.